Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Skyrim. My name is Camel, and more importantly, welcome back to the Curating Curiosities series for the final episode within Skyrim. In this video today, I will be curating to you the curious curiosities that can be found within a plane of oblivion, known as the Soul Cairn, added with the Dawnguard DLC. Now before we get cracking, timestamps for each of the curiosities in this video can be found down in the description and in the comments. Down there you can also find links to my other Curating Curiosities videos and my social media links. Be sure to check all of that out after this video. Now, the Soul Cairn, an unusual and unwelcoming place, and quite unique in its own gravely way. But to understand the Soul Cairn, we must understand where it came from, as it is a plane of oblivion. But rather than being lorded by a Daedric prince, the Soul Cairn is ruled by mysterious entities known simply as the Ideal Masters, a name they bestowed upon themselves. Now, the Ideal Masters were once soul merchants who too knew the burden of flesh, like you and I, but found their bodies unacceptably weak and limiting. Now, through necromantic rituals and arcane soul thaumaturgy, the Ideal Masters transcended to a higher state of existence, now ascended to non-corporeal beings, meaning they have no physical forms. They simply exist as a conscious essence of pure soul energy. They then entered Oblivion and selected an area of chaotic creatia to conceive their very own soul harvesting plane of Oblivion, the Soul Cairn, a realm ideal for their role as reapers and spirit harvesters. They control every aspect of the Soul Cairn's reality. Although now omnipresent entities, gold means nothing to them, only the souls to fuel their endless life have value. But they do hoard treasure as currency to exchange for souls or trick poor fools into joining their service eternally. And while they are now free from their bodies, they do occasionally take on the physical form of giant purple crystals, which we can find all throughout the Soul Cairn. But be wary, as if you get too close they will begin to drain your soul energy, the same effect this video will have on you. Now, the Ideal Masters are not to be trusted, as they will always betray those who deal with them, primarily necromancers and dark merchants, who seek great power or armies of the undead, but instead find themselves in eternal service within the Soul Cairn. Now, if you are interested in learning more about the Ideal Masters, I do have a full video explaining all known lore about them, where we actually interact with one of them in the Elder Scrolls Legend Battle Spire. So if that sounds interesting, be sure to check out that video up above. But for now, back to the Soul Cairn. Geographically, the Soul Cairn is harsh, old, weathered, and worn. There are stretching dunes of pale sand, mounds of dust, and crooked sheets of cracked earth, held together with, quite literal, infinite seas of bones, littering the barren and hollow landscape of forests of strange tombstone-like obelisks. Many obscure oily black stone buildings and structures stand rigidly from the swallowing sands, along with smooth and warped monoliths reaching for the crackling maelstrom above. Lightning strikes often and ferociously, whispers leak from cracks in the land, and temperatureless mists swill and swirl from the tortured terrain. There is a dry and haunting air filled with the damning silence of millions of souls crying, a description that makes no sense on paper, but does once you've experienced the swollen emptiness of the Soul Cairn. You'll understand entirely. Now, such a harsh and barren landscape has left little room for flora, if you could even call it that. There are these black skeletal trees forming bone-like bosks and grave-like groves. Whether they are dead or if they just grow like this, I can't say. Along with them are blackened shrubs, leafless, littering the hills and tors. Whether they live or not is not for me to say. There is also this grey ivy type of vine that stretches its tendrils across the floor, although it is quite rare. Again, I'm uncertain if it's alive or dead. Tufts of grass are commonly found, softening the harsh ghastliness of the region. While it is very dark, it does appear to be green. Perhaps there is some life here after all, feeding off the soul energy instead of sunlight, water, and nutrients. And there is, of course, the strange, spongy, fungus-like cones that grow in clusters known as soul husks, which can be picked and eaten to prevent the Ideal Masters harvesting your soul energy for a short period of time. While not flora or fauna, there are soul fissures that can be found. These are cracks in the dead soil, with soul energy leaking from beneath, with a ghostly trickle of desperate whispers spilling out into our ears. If we interact with one, it will fill the largest empty soul gem we have in our inventory, a very handy and righteous way to steal soul energy from the ideal masters. There are also soul wells. These are huge glowing craters, and if we stand in one, our health will be regenerated, but the energy within the well will be consumed and fade. Presumably, we are being healed by raw, untamed soul energy. Now onto the fauna. Quite simply, there is no fauna. There are, however, souls and undead. So, I don't know, ectofauna? Necrofauna? Yeah, we've got some of that. Now, when a soul is trapped within a black soul gem and its energy is used to power an enchantment, the remnant, the soul itself, is sent to the soul cairn. Now, black soul gems can capture the souls of humanoids, which are primarily the souls we find within the soul cairn, but they can also capture white souls. Therefore, it is within the lore to find the souls of non-humanoid creatures within the soul cairn. Interestingly, we find an endless amount of bones here, including mammoth skeletons and dragon skeletons even. I'm entirely unsure of how bones and skeletons end up within the soul cairn, considering souls are sent here and not bodies, especially dragon souls and their skeletons. The answers to such questions are not addressed by canon or noteworthy non-canon sources, so we're all equally in the dark in this regard. But along with the souls and the mysterious bones, we have undead servants of the realm, beings who pledge themselves into eternal service to the ideal masters. These take the form of mistmen, floating skeletal torsos, hovering on a violent breath of black mist. We also have bonemen, average skeletal warriors with stained black bones. There are also wrathmen, with their glowing purple bones and wearing the armor of ancient Nords, which is quite curious. There are also keepers, strange, towering creatures, with the flesh of a humanoid on their limbs, but in the place of a head is just a black foggy void with glowing eyes. We also have these things called whispering spirits. Now, they cannot be attacked, and they are not considered dead or alive. They also cannot be killed. They are quite simply just here, acting much like a wisp does, and I do believe they share the same model. They are just a purple version, but what exactly they actually are is unknown. Enemies will even sometimes chase them and try and attack them, which is actually rather amusing to watch, and in some rare cases it can be beneficial, as they will steal your foe's attention. There is also Valerica, a vampire, therefore undead, and Durnehviir, an undead dragon, who pledged himself to the ideal masters in exchange for great power, but of course was tricked and is now trapped here eternally. And there might just be some other things in here, but we'll save those for later. The Soul Cairn is a location that can be very intense and overwhelming for most players, much like Blackreach. And while we can return to the Soul Cairn, we are only sent here once for a quest. And while we travel the plains, there is also no respite, there is no place to rest and heal. There is no map markers, there is no map. The landscape is obscure and confusing, making it near impossible to navigate. For this reason, most players get in and out as quickly as possible. But that is why I love it, as it's an area that beats you, rather than you beating it. For this reason, a lot of players have not fully explored the Soul Cairn and discovered all of its strange and wonderful secrets. But we're safe now, so come, take my hand as I curate to you the curious curiosities that can be found within the Soul Cairn. As we descend the stairs leading from Nirn into the Soul Cairn and make our way along the blurred path into the unknown, we'll see on our left the Black Bar Repository, a small square building made of a dark stone, much like all the other structures in here. At the base of the stairs that leads up, there is a soul standing, waiting it would seem, but for what? That's not known. If we make our way up to the sanded steps, we'll be met by black bars, sealing the room off from us. Now, there are two obelisk locks that stand clearly in sight on either side of the gateway, with their pulsing turquoise orbs floating in flirt, with two huge bolts of cobalt cloth flapping and ripping through the dry, hollow air. Now, to unlock the black bars, we must hit both of the orbs in each of the obelisk locks. The easiest way to do this is to use a bow and arrow, and if you didn't bring any, luck is on your side this day, as someone has left a bow and some arrows lying on the side of the platform for anyone to use, namely us in this scenario. We must deactivate both the orbs and the black bars will fall, opening the repository to us. And now that she's open, we may enter, where we'll find a chest at the back of the small room. Before we get to that though, at the very back there is a small window with a conjurer's draft and some skeletal remains, suggesting that someone tried to climb through the window, got stuck, and perished here. This may be the remains of the soul that stands guard outside. As we'll see throughout this journey, the wandering souls who actually died within the soul cairn tend to linger near their bodies. So again, it could very well have been this adventurer attempting to loot from the Black Bar repository. But back to the treasure. The chest contains loot that is of course randomly generated depending on your level, with a soul cairn twist of course, i.e. it will always have a soul gem with it. Next to the chest there is a soul gem holder with nothing other than a greater soul gem within it. On the ground in front of the chest there is a steel dagger of draining, an unused black soul gem, a very rare and valuable item, and in the middle there is a piece of paper. This is Jiub's Opus page 8. We won't read it now, but be sure to collect it for later on. All in all, a sweet little raid and plunder of one of the Ideal Master's treasuries, the Black Bar repository. And now our pockets are loaded, let's venture on to the next point of interest. Wandering on to the east, where in a short walk we'll find the Totem of the Antlered One. In a sunken thicket of gnarled trees, the ground blanketed with the brittle, bristled fingers of dead shrubs poking through the heavy haze. Here, a whispering spirit patrols the area, glancing and gliding around in merriment. But the main attraction is this unnerving and unfamiliar totem that has been erected in the gloom, praising something, but it is not revealed whom. The base is a mound of bones and sinew, supporting the body of the totem. At the front is a soul gem holder with an empty black soul gem within it, likely left as an offering to who or whatever this Antlered One is. Now, if we approach this spot in an effort to collect the black soul gem, several Bonemen will rise from their resting places, ready to protect whatever this place is, so be sure to be wary of that. Now, the totem itself is primarily comprised of the vertebrae from the neck of a dragon skeleton, atop which is a humanoid skull. But what is most curious and notable, as I'm sure you've noticed, is the two antlers crowned atop the skull. Now, it could be that someone built this totem and got the skull and added antlers out of random bones and bits and pieces lying around. This is interesting if true, as this is the only pair of antlers in the entirety of the soul cairn. So that's a curiosity in itself. And given that there are no other antlers in here, I'm going to say it's entirely unlikely that these antlers were sourced from other bones here. Now, it could be that this is the skull of a creature that has a humanoid head and antlers. Following this thought, I did go through every single creature in the Elder Scrolls universe, and we have a few possibilities. There are two types of Daedra that have a humanoid head and antlers just like these. They are the Hern and the Morphoid Daedra. Aesthetically, this most certainly fits the shape of one of the skulls. Now, the problem with this is that when a Daedra dies, its physical form vanishes, entirely suggesting that it would leave no skeleton behind. And in all my years of playing the Elder Scrolls games, I have never once seen the skeletal remains of a Daedra. Not to say that it hasn't happened, but I can neither remember, conjure, nor find through research anything that suggests it's possible to end up with a Daedra skeleton. So, sadly, it would appear this skull with antlers does not belong to either of those creatures. There is a third option, however, that is much closer to home. This could in fact be the skull of a Bosma, a wood elf. There was once a time where early mortals were transforming from humanoid to animal to plant and back again, and somehow some of these animalistic traits stuck with the Bosma from their bestial stages before Ifri gave the Bosmeri people a stable form, post Green Pact of course. And guess what? It is actually within canon lore for Bosma, the Wood Elves, to potentially have antlers or horns. In the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, we see a very subtle example of this, with skin-covered humps atop the forehead. In the Elder Scrolls Online, we see this in full swing, where a Bosmer may have rather large antlers, and also see examples of this in the Elder Scrolls Legends art. So it would seem that over time this trait was almost lost and been bred out of the Bosmeri gene pool. So this wouldn't be a modern day Bosmer, but we find some very ancient remains within the Soul Cairn, so this skull could very well be that of an ancient Bosmer, bearing this genetic trait of antlers, which are either due to transformations between humanoid, beast and plant, or some kind of hangover from a wild hunt transformation. Either way, whatever the cause is, it is entirely within the lore for this to be the skull of a Bosmer, and that is in fact the most likely option here. That or someone built this out of random bones, which again, they seem to have found the only 2 antlers within the Soul Cairn to do so, which makes me think that is not the case at all, though. So you take your pick, either way it's very interesting. Heading directly south from our last location, we'll come across the Crumbling Crypt, a structure that has definitely seen better days, along with everything else in this plane, as we can see with the fallen rooftop half buried in dust and bricks. Inside we'll find piles of bones and stone, a few shrubs and grass. There is a stack of slabs that is home to 2 soul gems, sitting atop a black slate. A petty soul gem and a greater soul gem, both filled with souls of something. A rather boring location, but if we take a look outside, where, a stone's throw away, we will stumble upon this staircase that leads up from a depression in the ground towards the Crumbling Crypt. But it doesn't actually link up with it simply points towards it and it's kind of near it. A structural oddity that we'll find commonplace within the Soul Cairn. There is, however, this teleporter at the top of the staircase, and if we jump into it, we will be teleported to the roof of the Crumbling Crypt, where we will be met by a Boneman standing guard, a sentry in wait, for any foolish or brave enough to be transported up here. Along with the skeleton, we can find a chest nestled into a pile of bones, within which is random leveled Soul Cairn loot, aka soul gems. Although as we approach this, a Wrathman will rise from the bones protecting his master's treasure, so be sure to be wary of that. But once the dead are bested and the chest has been plundered, we'll leave this crypt to crumble. Heading to the due east, we can find our next curiosity, a dragon skeleton sitting half claimed by the sand and marrow soot of the Soul Cairn. But as we draw closer, like a moth to a flame, or an explorer to a curious sight, we'll notice that there is actually a sword thrust through the maw of the dragon, piercing the beast from lower jaw all the way through into its skull, presumably delivering the killing blow. This is a steel sword of shock, and not something one would leave behind, given the choice, which makes me think whoever slid the blade through the dragon's head was in no situation to reclaim their valuable weapon. Now, if we move down the dragon's body, in what would be the throat or the esophagus of the drake lies a pair of ancient Nordic gauntlets. Strange? Maybe the dragon choked to death on a delicious Nord meal. But if we keep tracking down into the belly of the beast, there is something very interesting. A skeleton, no doubt swallowed whole, with an arm outstretched, presumably grasping for an escape from the stomach of the Dovar. I have not a shadow of doubt in my mind that the gauntlets belong to the person eaten by the dragon, which would naturally lead us to conclude that this was an ancient Nord, given the make of the gauntlets. Now, an ancient Nord plus a dragon means that this is likely a fossil from the Dragon Wars. I've explained this event in detail in my video about Alduin's War, if you feel so inclined to learn more. But what's confusing about this is who did the sword belong to? Surely not the poor fool who was consumed by the dragon's maw. If this was the killing blow, which I do believe it to be, then the dragon would have been dead and unable to swallow this Nord. And if the sword was thrust how it is, there is no way a dragon could hope to gobble down a delicious Nordic snack. So I would be in my right mind to assume this Nord was eaten alive, and then his extra enraged buddy pierced this dragon's skull with one vehement strike, killing the beast for munching on his mate. Now, what events then led both of these corpses to find their way to the Soul Cairn? Now that I cannot explain. Nonetheless, a truly interesting find in the bleak barrenness of this desolate and dead desert. Now, making our way a hop, skip, and a step due east, we'll find our next curiosity, the Master's Harvest. Here we'll find a rather large fortification. While weathered, it's definitely in better condition when compared to some of the other structures we've seen around here. The only way into this walled building is through a tunnel illuminated by a pink light. Naturally, we're attracted to the pink tunnel and we must enter it, although it's a bit more barren than we'd like. This opens up into quite a tight courtyard where ruins, shrubs, and grass have made their home. Hiding in a pillared shelter, there is a soul crippled in defeat, sitting on the ground, exhausted. Now, it's never a good sign when you see a soul that's out of breath, but the explanation will all come to fruition in the coming minutes. From the courtyard, there is a staircase that leads up to a walkway that wraps around the upper levels of the complex. Midway around, we'll spot another soul in an even more concerning state, attempting to make shelter under a lazily stacked mound of black stone slabs, lying on their side, shaking, terrified, traumatized, unable to do anything but shiver in fear, attempting to find comfort in meekness, although this seems to be futile, or in this case, fetal. Traveling the walkway further, we'll descend to the third wall, where we'll meet a final stair that climbs high into the belfry. But no bells can be heard here. The only thing that rings is a sense of terror as we turn our gaze upwards, only to be met by an ideal master. Up here on the final platform, we'll find a third soul, hunched and shaken, unable to do anything but suffer. They either all have tax due, or the ideal masters have something to do with the mass agony infecting the local souls. Before we get to that, however, up here, right under the crystalline demigod, there is a chest which will contain a much beyond average collection of random level loot. Although be warned, it is guarded by the ideal master, who will begin to suck our soul energy as we begin our ascent up the black staircase. So make haste, there is no time to waste. Now, given that the ideal masters harvest soul energy to fuel their eternal life, I would be safe in concluding that this particular ideal master is in a constant state of soul sapping from these nearby souls. That's why they are literal husks of souls broken and submitted. No doubt the master is tormenting them beyond mortal comprehension, as they do and have done to all in their service for as long as time can recall. I think it is quite wise to get out of here as quickly as possible before we too are too weak to escape the eternal servitude the ideal masters long to lock us into. A short ways north, we'll stumble upon a shocking discovery, as someone before us also did. Here there is a large paved area with an obscure and unfamiliar altar at its center. I'm definitely getting a certain buzz about this place. It is small, but it's full of character, and a literal character. Some shallow steps lead to a small stone pile which has a pole of some sort rising from its core, behind which is a chest which will of course contain loot of the Soul Cairn kind and of the leveled and randomized variety. Be on guard, however, as it is to be expected, while we draw near to the loot, two Bonemen and a Wrathman will climb from the stacks of bones, ready to make us fight our way to the treasure. Something curious though, is the black scorch marks burnt into the lid of the chest. Perhaps there was a fire here? I'm unsure. But where my eyebrow raises is that the exploded skeletal remains scattered before the altar, with an arm outstretched and a greater soul gem sitting on the ground. Assumedly this person was holding it when they died. Splattered like a bug to the boot of an enraged entomophobic. But how did they die? It would appear to be the very same force that scorched the chest, as there are these same very dark and heavy blast marks on the surrounding bones. All the answers to this mystery lie within the altar. Well, actually it's no altar but rather a contraption. presumably engineered by the Ideal Masters. It's known as a lightning attractor, and while yes, it does attract the bolts from above, it serves a much more practical purpose too, as we can actually activate the soul gem holder at the base of the lightning rod. This will place a soul gem from our inventory within it. Once this action is performed, the heavens, or hells in this case, open up, and electricity strikes true, injecting its raw electrical power into the lightning attractor, and into the soul gem itself, it would seem. In a split second, the soul gem we placed within it will be transformed from a standard soul gem into a black soul gem. Of course, black soul gems are a much rarer and more valuable variant. Now this action can only be done once per lightning rod attractor, and even though after some time the lightning rod will come back up and stand tall once again, the soul gem conversion cannot be repeated. Nonetheless, it's worth doing. But what's interesting to me is what went wrong here? How did this person end up being struck by lightning? Maybe they held onto the soul gem while the ritual was in progress, and they ironically trapped their soul within the soul cairn, instead of converting their greater soul gem into a black soul gem. Although they do appear to have been a few steps backwards from the interactable lightning rod attractor. But whatever happened here, it most certainly sparked my interest. Making our way to the northwest, we'll be met by a huge wall that cuts through the soul cairn, a welcome landmark in this bewildering hellscape. But along with brick and weathered monolith, we'll find something else in the wall. A set of stairs that lead up to a site that naturally is igniting our curious nature, drawing us in for a closer inspection. Up here we'll find a window in the wall, clearly marked by two flapping bolts of tattered linen. There is also a soul standing idle, resting against the wall, which seems kind of boring, but to be fair, it's much better than being tortured by an ideal master. On the ground in front of the window pane lies a lesser soul gem filled with a soul. On the right-hand pedestal is a tome, the Book of Life and Service, authored by an unknown. The ranks of the blessed. Blessed are the Bonemen, for they serve without self in spirit forever. Blessed are the Mistmen, for they blend in the glory of the transcendent spirits. Blessed are the Wrathman, for they render their rage unto the ages. Blessed are the Masters, for they bridge the past and span the future. The Litany of Service. The Boneman's Oath. We die, we pray, to live, we serve. The Master's voice, you swore, to serve your Lord. A creepy tome that's reminiscent of the dialogue heard within the soul cairn in the Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire. And it's also a tome that we'll see more copies of throughout the soul cairn. On the left hand of this same pedestal is a malign aversion to fire, and a worn piece of parchment. This is Jiub's Opus page number 1. For now, we'll just collect it and read the whole series later on when we get all the pages. Now this window also gives us a glimpse into a small inlet which is on the other side of the wall, which we'll get to soon enough. But for now, we'll bid this soul farewell and take off with the Opus page. Walking to the west of here towards the main pathway, we'll find our next curiosity, the Hollow Tower. A small yet tall structure with sunken and inaccessible rooms and floors around it. Inside we'll find a Boneman standing guard over the only notable things in here, that being a chest with some bits and bobs. Inside the chest we'll find a rather healthy assortment of loot, appropriate for our level. But in front of the chest on the ground is what we're really here for, a sack of coin, a petty soul gem, and Jiub's Opus page number 6. Be sure to snap that bad boy up. Now if we tilt our heads back and gaze upwards, we'll see something great. Well, not that great, but it's a literal great, giving the building its name, the Hollow Tower. Now if we take a step back outside, we'll see there is a glowing well. This is actually a teleporter. If we step into this, we will be transported to the roof of the Hollow Tower, where we can find a hidden treasure, only to be found by the avid adventurer. Luckily, there are no undead surprises lying in wait. On the ground, or in this case on the roof, we can find a lesser soul gem, and the same book we saw not long ago, the Book of Life and Service. And of course we have a chest, which will be home to an assortment of soul gems. Once we gather those, we'll have to parkour our way off the roof of the Hollow Tower and be on our merry way. our merry way to the far northwest, where we'll find a large walled corner of the plain with a gatehouse at its entrance. Up the stairs we trot into the extremely dark chamber, where there is not much of note at all. I mean, besides the chest, of course. Apart from that, the most notable thing in here is a pillar. And it might be holding up the roof, but it's not holding my interest. Of course, our good friend the chest will be home to 11 gold. Moving on and out of that antechamber of boredom, we'll enter the Master's Garden, a rather large and private section of the Soul Cairn, like an untamed macro Zen garden, minus the Zen. With each step we take on the timeless ghost soil, we'll hear the clattering of bones as Bonemen rise from the dead dirt and prepare to protect their master. At the center of the area are 2 soul wells. If you require healing, jump in them, of course. At the back, against the magical barrier, we can see a raised outlook, with an ideal master floating omnisciently above the highest platform. As you'd expect, we must be wary and swift while approaching the ideal master, as it will begin to siphon our soul energy when we draw near. Now, under the ideal master is what it truly guards, a chest filled with bountiful booty, randomized depending on your level, of course. On the cold stone floor at the base of the chest is a copper and sapphire circlet, a very valuable and light piece to scurry off with. But before we do that, we must also gather the piece of paper here. This is Jiub's Opus page 3. Once our pockets are stuffed and we have enough of a soul left, we gotta go, son, and leave this accursed corner of the Soul Cairn. Now we'll be heading back to the main pathway, and through the Great Wall, making our way to the northeast, where we'll find one of the few comforting curiosities within the Soul Cairn. As soon as we pass through the wall, on the eastern side of the path, we'll spy a dense cluster of small structures, with a soul pacing out the front. Now the soul is a guy named Morven Stroud, and we can actually talk to him, which naturally we'll do.
Well, look what we have here. Someone with flesh on their bones.
Sup, brother?
Let's just say I sold something to a guy who turned out to work for a whole coven of necromancers. How in the name of Zenithar was I to know the ingredients were phony? Do I look like someone that would double-cross a necromancer?
You got the rough end of the pineapple, man.
You got it. Horse, wagon, and all. Plopped here without so much as a word. I used to be one of the best traders in High Rock, you know. Well, people would track me down just to see what I had for sale.
Show us your wares, I've got coin.
Very funny. And what exactly are you going to pay me with? Take a look around. Gold doesn't exactly win you any friends around here.
You want something? A cobbler maybe. He can fix your soul.
I'll tell you what. I appreciate what you're trying to do, so I'll play along. The only thing I see around here in abundance are soul husks. You know, those ugly fungus-looking things growing out of the ground. Bring me, say, 25 of them, and you can rummage through what was left on my cart.
Fair enough. What's on the menu?
Odds and ends I've gathered over the years. Well, used to gather, before all of this nonsense happened to me. Tell me what you're looking for, and maybe we can make a deal. If you have the husks.
I don't have 25 soul husks, but I will.
You still got it, Morven. A salesman even beyond the end.
Now, of course, we must go out and search the surrounding area, hunting down soul husks with our keen nose like a truffle pig. Or just use your eyes. Now, once we have 25 or more soul husks, we can head back to Morven Stroud and deal with him.
Brought some soul husks? Or are you wasting my time?
Yeah, sell to me, please.
Well, I've been so busy, I don't know. What, are you kidding me?
Now, we will be met with some choices here, but upon selecting one, we'll get a random level-appropriate item of that category.
This won't stop your soul from getting ripped out, but at least you'll look good when your corpse hits the ground.
As you can see, I selected heavy armor, and got this pair of gauntlets, which, considering they were exchanged for 25 soul husks, you know, some random and pretty worthless fungus, that's a pretty good deal. So be sure to collect soul husks when you see them, so you can trade them in for something more valuable and tangible from our new pal here, Morven Stroud. Now speaking of young Morven Stroud, he mentioned he was pulled here through some bad tidings with a group of necromancers. Interestingly, he appears to have been torn through with his cart of wares, which explains why he still has them with him. And because this is clearly the case, this leads us to believe that this skeleton here is his. As mentioned before, those who die within the soul cairn tend to stand near their bodies now that they're souls. On his corpse we can just find a bit of gold, nothing that interesting. But next to his wagon there are two barrels. Atop one of them is a piece of paper. This is Jiub's Opus page 10. We'll read it with the others later, but for now, let's take a look at the series of structures behind Morven. In the middle stands a huge vault with glowing soul well on either side, the rigidity of the bricks catching the ghost light in a beautiful way. At the center of a small set of stairs that leads up to a doorway blocked by iron bars. As before, we must find and deactivate the two obelisk locks. To the left, we can see one up on the top of the wall, standing tall in front of the Gothic Acropolis. And to the right, there is one at ground level, both of which are quite easy to deactivate, which upon doing so will lower the bars and grant us access into the Iridescent Vault, within which is a large and primarily empty room, save for the chest resting in wait for someone to relieve it of its contents, which of course will be of the random leveled loot kind. Now back outside there is a strange staircase on the southern side of the courtyard that just leads up to a higher platform, at the end of which however is a glowing well, and it turns out this is actually a teleporter. When we enter it, we'll be transported onto the roof of the Iridescent Vault. Rather curiously though, there's nothing up here. At first we'll feel tricked, but from here we can actually jump down onto a lower rooftop on the northern side of the courtyard, where, tucked into the cloaking shadows cast by the small barbed roof, there is a chest which will contain a small handful of soul gems, one of which is black, very valuable. We can then hop our way back down to the cold stone floor and on with our curious adventure. Now just to the south, buried into the great curtain wall that cuts through the soul cairn, we can find the other side of the window in the wall that we looked through earlier. Here in a narrow cutout that drives deep into the foundations of the bulwark, we'll find a chest, inside which will be a rather meek selection of soul gems. Collect them, and then like Humpty Dumpty, from the wall, we'll be off. Making our way to the northwest, we'll be stopped in our tracks by a towering storehouse with a soul well at the front. This is the Devoid Depository. There is, as we see so often here, a staircase that just leads to nowhere, almost as if this edifice was once much different, and the eons of bearing victim to the harsh and unrelenting conditions of the soul cairn has shifted and detached structures from purpose. Now the set of stairs that does connect with the depository lead to a locked and sealed gateway, blocked by black bars once again. As before, we'll need to locate and deactivate the obelisk locks, both of which can actually be found within the room, accessible by the open walls. Once they have been switched off, the bars shutting us out will have been lowered and we'll be able to access the room. Inside, there is a single Boneman standing guard over, well, nothing. This depository is quite literally devoid of all worth. There is not a scrap in here. Perhaps it has been raided by an adventurer before us, maybe the player character from the Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire. Why there is nothing in here cannot be confirmed, but it does render this place just a prank. A big blank prank that I was thoroughly unimpressed by. So, let's move along to more interesting pastures. Moving directly north, we'll find a rather strange yet, to be honest, wholesome curiosity, the Soul Sweeper. Amidst the barren dust plains, a large collection of dark structures have been planted deeply in the timeless terrain. At the side, there is a large paved area with a single soul pacing back and forth. If we sit and watch her, she actually has a broomstick and will pull it out and sweep the area, then move on to the next spot. Personally, to me, this is almost worse than being tortured by an ideal master, having to sweep an endless plane of oblivion for eternity. How exactly she got here, and with a broom, I don't know, perhaps she was a witch and brought her vehicle with her. One thing's for sure, she had a brush with death. But seriously, what is she doing? I'm raking my brains, and I can only assume she's either bored or being forced to do it. Trying to clean the dust from the dustiest place I've ever seen, besides my computer fans of course, this must be endlessly exhausting. Hopefully she can rest soon and she gets some sleep. Now, on the northern side of the same collection of structures, we find ourselves standing on yet another tiled terrace wherein we can find our next curiosity. Here there is a skeleton, slumped on its back with a coin purse at hand. Gazing down in longing memory is a soul, dressed in leather armor, equipped with a bow and arrows, suggesting that this soul walked the path of a hunter in life, and that these remains are his. As we see so often in these Curating Curiosities videos, the hunter has become the hunted. Now the satchel, brimming with septums, implies that a trade was made in his last moments. To whom an exchange was made is unknown, likely a necromancer, although his body being in the soul cairn may suggest that he died within it, and given there is an ideal master right nearby, he may have made a direct exchange with the ideal master himself. Whatever happens, I'm sure he's not in high spirits about it. Now, binding all of these obscure structures together, we have the Master's Acropolis, a raised area at the center of the towers, rooms and keeps that bud from the silvered sands which surround. Here there are 3 separate stairs that lead to the same raised outlook, granting a view over the stretching grey pastures to any who stand upon it. The most attention-stealing aspect of its being is the cinched chapel that stands barred and locked, atop which hovers an ideal master, gazing down unto his kingdom of shrieking gosma and cinereal morass. The property is littered with mounds of blackened bones and onyx bricks, scattered like dice in a back alley gamble, liberally painting layers of eccentricity over the already coated location. A sizable gang of spooks warden the ground, ready to protect their master's hermitage as they serve for eternity. If we wish to enter the cell that lies beneath the ideal master, we'll need to lower those blasted black bars. As before, we'll need to locate and deactivate the obelisk locks by striking the humming cerulean orbs within. One is less subtle than a rampant orc war chief in a barroom brawl and stands proudly in front of the ideal master, and the second lies hidden in an occult alcove, the entrance to which is primarily concealed and buried by stone. Striking them both will lower the bars, as so we may enter, like spacing a new paragraph. As we've witnessed throughout our journey so far, there is another soul sitting on the cobbled slab, bent and broken in submission to the absorbing lament of the master whom levitates in place of the heavens and a soothing god's hand in end, but instead imbibes the souls of the unwilling and willing alike, such as this poor fool. If we too tread into the shadows, we'll be within the reach of the ideal master, who will begin to hawk down our spirit. So, to collect the goods from within the chest that is now within our grasp, we should move with haste. Inside we'll find some soul gems and alchemical ingredients, including a suspiciously reoccurring Daedra heart. Whisk these reagents up and evacuate the chamber before we are taken in bounds, unless of course you're into that. A short sojourn to the east will enter a strange place, the Grave Haze Grove. A forest of unnatural and worn tombstones, placed facing inwards in a circular fashion. The dead grass and crunching sands beneath our feet are blanketed in a thick and unearthly fog. The occasional gnarled tree reaches from the dirt, frozen like ebon lightning inverted. Heaps and burrows worth of bones form small dunes and knolls of the dead. At the center of it all is an altar of some unfamiliar make. A large, squared block of black stone rests upon another, larger still, sunken deep into the land. Surrounding it like a dammed garden are sproutings of soul husks and a single desiccated tree. Resting against the side of the altar is a sack, which contains a handful or two of harvested soul husks. Be sure to take those for Morven later. The centerpiece is a candle shrine with no effigy for praise. A clutch of sweating candles flicker and waft, slowly streaming wisps of smoke and throwing a warm yellow glow onto the ghastly surroundings, illuminating the pair of lesser soul gems that rest in the soul gem holders atop the slate. The star of it all, however, is this conjuration spell tome for Conjure Boneman. If we pick it up, we'll be able to find it in our book tab, and activating it will teach us this spell. It will summon a Boneman archer from the soul cairn for 60 seconds, wherever the caster is pointing. A lovely new spell to add to your collection, especially if you wish to dabble in the dark arts of necromancy. Who placed this spell here, and why? That is almost an answer I don't want to look into. Let's just take it with us and move into the next chapter of the soul cairn. Moving to the northwest, we'll stumble upon one of the most impressive citadels this hellscape has to offer, bigger than most townships and settlements in Skyrim. It also holds one of the most interesting curiosities within the soul cairn. We'll get onto that one in a minute. Firstly, to the Twisting Spire. As we climb the storm-warm parvis and pass through the vestibule, we'll enter a courtyard and be met by a reaching sight, inspiring both fear and wonder. The Twisting Spire, a chantry of soul energy, a huge tower which stands proudly rising into the vortex above, with not a single break in the black stone. No window to be shone through, no clerestory or triforium to be peered through, just a menacing monolith, the spire of which has broken and shattered, but rather lie in ruin, it levitates in beauty. A nexus of soul energy rages within it, spinning the cracked citadel through the skies of the soul cairn. But, as impressive as that is, we must get back to the base, where a keeper waits in meditation. Behind him, a number of souls stand on the portico, as their soul energies bound to the Keeper's spell. If we approach the Keeper, he will awaken and engage in combat. Be very warned though, a Keeper is a huge enemy, with strength and ferocity matching their towering build, so be prepared for an epic battle against one of the great darknesses within the realm. Now once the battle is done, all that will be left behind is a pile of ghostly remains, from which all we can recover is a black soul gem. While this isn't too rewarding, we have defeated one of the 3 keepers of the soul cairn, whose spells maintain the barrier around the boneyard, which we'll get to later. So while not materialistic, in heroism and triumph we are rewarded. Now the souls that were bound to the tower and the ritual will also vanish upon the keeper's defeat. I like to think that they are now freed, but I'm sure they are actually destined to some drab fate at the hands of the ideal masters. Not that they have hands, but you know. Now from here, if we move just to the southwest, we'll be met by Barred Gateway. Luckily, with our current knowledge of the soul cairn and the 2 very obvious obelisk locks, we now know what to do. Shoot the aquamarine orbs within both of them, and the bars will fall. Be wary of the undead that shall come charging with weapons drawn. Pushing through the archway, we'll come out to the Master's Terrace, a large and squared outdoor area peppered with bonemen, bones, tombstones, and of course, the very obvious and tyrannical drifting Ideal Master. Underneath him there is a chest, and as the driven explorer we are, we'll need to get our hands on that damned chest. Be warned though, because as we approach, the Ideal Master will begin to claim our soul and suck the energy from us, gobbling down spirit, glutenizing our very anima. When we make it to the chest and look within, we'll find some random leveled loot, sure, but there is something else. A Reaper Gem Fragment. Now there are 3 of these in the soul cairn, and we'll need to collect all of them for later. For now though, snatch up these goodies and be gone. Moving to the northeast, back into the middle of the courtyard from whence we came, making our way over a mound of pale dirt through a rigid bower of black stone and piles of bones, out into a sunken pit of ghostly soil, pin-cushioned with graves and headstones. At the center of this inert trench, there is a teleporter gleaming seductively violet amongst the grey shades that surround us. If we jump into it, we'll be teleported up onto a higher walkway that stretches around the upper levels of the citadelic Twisting Spire. At the cornerstone of the angled promenade, there is a lightning attractor. As with the others, if we place a soul gem within the soul gem holder at the base of the rod, great and unrelenting lightning strikes will rain down with punch and bolt, magically converting the earthly soul gem into an unnatural yet more valuable and useful black soul gem. Now, through which magics or Adric or Daedric intervention this process is allowed, we'll never know. Just grab the black soul gem and make like the rod. Bolt. That is, if you can, because as we approach we'll hear the teeth-numbing sound of clattering bones and clinking calcium, as a number of undead will rise from the stacks of bodily remains that fill the corners of this paved pathway. So be sure to be wary of this ugly bunch. Now, if we go from the rod all the way to the second wing of the veranda, we will see there is a chest pushed up at the end. Inside here, we'll be able to get a solid handful of random leveled loot. Collect these wares, and then we'll need to find a way down so that we can move on to one of the most interesting curiosities within this realm. To find it, we'll need to head all the way around the back of the Twisting Spire, marching bravely into the northwesternmost corner of the accessible soul cairn. Thick seas of dead grass sprout mortally from the bone dust earth. The occasional charred and drained sapling leans crooked and knurled like the shattered hand of a retired pugilist. Keeping them company are the tall, slender shades of the haunted headstones that forest the realm. Amongst this forgotten bosque there lies a small paved square. Skeletal stockpiles have formed and heap at the edges, along with unused yet fully cut blocks of stone. Within the platform, we can find a teleporter glowing brightly, a wormhole to another place, but to where it leads we cannot see. We can only discover with a gutsy gate stepping into the arcane ring. Upon doing so, we'll be transported to an alarmingly high and entirely occult rooftop balcony, located about halfway up the backside of the Twisting Spire. And hey, anything involving a Twisting Spire and halfway up the backside is very exciting. But today for other reasons, as there is a scattering of prismatic miscellany along with a skeleton on the northern side of this area, which naturally we must inspect. Firstly, in the corner on a petite stone piece lies a scroll of Storm Thrall, a potion of extreme stamina, a potion of extreme magicka, and a potion of the night, which increases the heavy armor skill. Now, the Scroll of Storm Thrall is interesting within itself because it's the only Scroll of Storm Thrall that is within the game lying out in the environment. You can buy them from one merchant back in Skyrim, but in terms of finding them in the environment, there are none in the game except of course for this one. This collection alone suggests that whoever left these here had a decent to great understanding of alchemy, or perhaps just the import of potions. Fortifying this further, next to the skeleton sits a coin purse, a second potion of extreme stamina, and a knapsack, inside of which we can find a collection of varying goods, no doubt the cause of random leveled loot. Now, the skeleton itself holds little of interest, as they so often do. However, the specificity of the items that bestud the pavement within hand's grasp of the skeleton are very curious indeed. Firstly, there are some soul husks that have been picked. No doubt this traveller was consuming them to lessen the soul-draining effects of the ideal masters. That alone is knowledge only a wise man would have. There is also a staff of fireball, again fortifying the theory that this person was well versed in the arcane arts. But most intriguingly of all, the dagger. Now, this isn't any old dagger. This is a very rare blade known as a Dragon Priest dagger. Now, who used to carry Dragon Priest daggers? That's right, Dragon Priests. I do wholeheartedly believe that we have stumbled upon the remnants of an ancient Dragon Priest right here in the Soul Cairn. Also, when we approach the area, a single Mistman will rise from the stack of skulls, which to me implies that this could have been the same guy, and that he succumbed to the ideal masters, entering their eternal service. Now, there is also a campfire over at the edge, and firstly, if he had a campfire, it means he was here for some time, likely telling us that he stepped into the teleporter as we did, and ended up stranded all the way up here on this rooftop. He set up camp and planned and schemed, only to inevitably give in to the fact that he was stranded. His only salvation was to take the metaphorical crystalline hand of the Ideal Masters, being transformed into this Mistman we find here. Well, at least this is the best and most logical series of events that I can think of. But more curiously, why was there a dragon priest within the Soul Cairn? Perhaps he ventured here in an attempt to save Durnehviir. Maybe after the Dragon War, his powers were lost after Alduin's banishment, and he sought new power from new masters. There are many tales that we could weave as to why he's here, but we do know that he is here, a dragon priest within the Soul Cairn, destined to guard his own corpse, bound to eternal service of the Ideal Masters. Oh well, at least now that he's stuck on a rooftop, he's made it to the rank of High Priest. Migrating to the due east will leave the Twisting Spire and enter the empty plains of the Soul Cairn. But soon a titanic rectangular fortress will be in our path, decorated with the occasional window and barred door, crowned in crockets and sanctioned in spires. While it may seem to have many entries, there is only one that is not sealed by cold iron bars. The sallow trail that cuts through the dead kelp green meadow leads directly to the doorway we must enter. Now we climb the few steep stairs into the lightning-stricken labyrinth. While it may seem menial, and it is, I could not help but notice there is a nice little welcome rug just through the antechamber. Interior design is not what I would have expected from the Ideal Masters. But hey, maybe I'm wrong about them. Maybe they just rugged me the wrong way. But as we venture deeper into the Master's Maze, we'll be faced with twists and turns, holes that terminate in enemies that emanate from the floor. In the southwesternmost corner, we will find a room with a chest in it. Inside will be a lovely little sack full of loot for us to claim. Heading further into the dark, unlit tunnels, we'll eventually reach the center of the fortress, where there will be a Rathman standing at the ready. Next to him is a stone plinth with 2 harvested soul husks, and again, rather strangely, a Daedra heart. As I've explained in my video dedicated to the Ideal Masters, they do not seem to have any connection to the Daedra, so finding these excessively rare alchemical ingredients in any numbers within the Soul Cairn is nothing short of strange. Anyway, moving on to the eastern side of the labyrinth, we'll enter a hallway which has quadruple the thread count of the entry antechamber. There are a total of 4 beautiful rugs laid out rather lazily on the ground. Again, not what I expected, nor do I have an explanation for it, or as to why there are 5 rugs, the likes of which we haven't seen at all in the Soul Cairn, and they're all here in this one building. Well, we'll just step over these and move around the corner, and we'll see a single sack slumped against the back wall. Inside this sack, there are 7 harvested soul husks. Be sure to grab these so that we can trade them to our pally old chum Morven Stroud later on. Now, around to the right at the end of yet another hallway is a chest, although be careful as you approach because a Boneman will clatter his way from the burial mound around the chest. Inside it, however, there is a collection of soul gems. Harvest them. Now, moving back to the rugged hallway, following it through all the way to the northeasternmost corner of the Master's Maze, we'll find an open chamber with an iron-barred grate as a ceiling. It's a rather large room with one aspect that draws our eye, and that would be the teleporter at the core of the room's feng shui. Stepping into it, we'll be transported to the rooftop, where we'll find ourselves once again face to crystal face with an Ideal Master, who floats in a terrifying calmness overhead the maze he has made his home. Now, under the Master, there is a chest, but even more excitingly, next to the chest on the ground, there is a lesser soul gem and a piece of parchment. This is Jiub's Opus page 9. We won't read it now, but be sure to grab it for later on. Now, as always, as we draw too close, the Ideal Master will feast upon our fervor, and we must be swift in our actions and escape its cabalistic tendrils. Before we depart from danger, be sure to loot the chest, as in here is the one and only soul essence gem. This is needed for the questline within the Soul Cairn, and will prevent the negative effects of our being within this realm of oblivion. Unless you are, of course, a vampire, in which case the soul essence gem will not be present, as you have no such need for it, as you are not living. Now, once all the goodies have been scooped up and salvaged, we will make haste in exiting this maze and the grips of its master. Journeying to the southeast of here, we'll come across a large chapel-like structure, marked clearly by huge onyx columns, proudly poised on either side of the thoroughfare, leading to the alluring amalgamation of substructures. Around the side, there are huge stone cubes buried deep beneath the soil, signs of a much greater web of lost and inaccessible tunnels. At the back, there is one of our old friends, the big old staircase that leads to absolutely nowhere. It would seem this was once attached to the core building, but over time and exposure to the silently warping sands of the Soul Cairn has broken away. This is interesting, however, as it reveals within the stomach of the black stone tens of thousands of bones, at very least endless corpses packed into the cold, oiled and umbral slabs. A mortuary of millions, a hecatomb hemorrhaged and bleeding bones into the hellscape. But now we will attempt to penetrate the Master's Catacomb gallery. This can be done at the front of the building, where we can find a crypt hatch that sinks below into the subterrane. Through here we'll find a long hallway, likely once a columbarium, a gallery for the enshrined urns swollen with ashes. 2 Bonemen stand guard, protecting their alley of despondency. But soon enough we'll start to head back up, and we'll come out into a huge open room. But be warned, as this is the Catacomb gallery of an ideal master. Windowed walls and 2 huge breaks make way for dull photons to dimly paint the Raven Room. A series of winder stairs lead higher and higher into the chamber until we reach the ideal master. But be warned as always, as if we get too close, our very Nomenon will be noshed upon by the soul-hungry and pellucid presence. Beneath the ideal master there is a chest, inside of which we can find a ripe selection of random leveled booty. Just make sure that you're also over level 18 so the booty is too. Anyway, once we've emptied the chest and have enough strength to escape the ideal master's grips, we'll leave this place, never to look back, hoping that it sinks into the sands for good. Making our way to the northeast, we'll begin to climb a hill leading towards the citadel known as the Boneyard, at the top of which is a side fortification, and while being a small addition to the huge Boneyard, it's still a huge structure on its own. It's a glowing keep of soul energy, lighting up like a colossal candelabra of dread, and the burning of lost souls crackles muffled in our ears. At the front, there is a thick and dense entryway that leads to the heart of the bastion. Once we re-emerge back into the light of oblivion, we'll find ourselves in a courtyard. Now, despite there being a huge series of walkways, stairs, and various levels, there is only one area of interest to us, and that is the center of the courtyard, which alone bears enough intrigue for the entire location, as here at the nucleus, shrouded in a nexus of mist, sits a defeated Exidra, a raised crescent of dark stone weathered and beaten. At the base of it we can find a chest. However, you may have spotted that this is a boss level chest, which first of all means that it has better than average loot, but much more curiously, the stylization and motif of this chest is unique to the Soul Cairn and has no natural place here, as all the other chests we run across in here are made of black stone and glow with a haunting periwinkle purple light. This, however, looks just like the chests we find in Skyrim, inside Nordic burial chambers. How it got here cannot be confirmed. In fact, I struggle to even ponder. But there is a much bigger question looming in the coming minutes. Now, inside the chest we can find a wholly hearty party of goods ripe for the picking. Now, on the grounds before the chest we can find a coin purse, a ruby, and a piece of paper, which is Jiub's Opus page 2, which we'll be sure to collect and take with us for much later on. Now, you might have the same feeling that I did and sense that there is something oddly familiar about this location, but you can't quite point to why. Well, prepare to be liberated from such mental haze, as this is no ordinary stone wall. It's a word wall. It's hard to recognize in this setting, with the grim lighting and the fact it's more than halfway sunken into the swallowing sands. Regardless of its condition, it is still a word wall. Despite this, and despite being dragonborn, when we approach it no shout will be learnt. It appears to have been deactivated, if that's even possible. Now, how a word wall ended up within the soul cairn is a question, again, I cannot answer. Perhaps as we saw with Morven Stroud's cart, soulless objects can be torn from Mundus and into the soul cairn. Although a whole word wall seems a bit intense, but it is here. Not only that, but it is also paired with a Nordically motifed chest, as if they came here as a pair, suggesting that they were brought here, one way or another, together. Now that would have been some sight, witnessing a materialistic plane exchange on that scale. Sad its wisdom and words were lost with its place within Mundus. Now it just sits as a linguistic grave of Dobazul. Anyway, let's leave this place, before this video, like the wall, starts to drag on. Travelling far to the south from here, back down to where Morven Stroud and his wares of despair reside, in the desiccated wastes reaching far and void, we'll find the Dark Diode Dais, guarded by Bonemen, Archers, Mistmen, and Wrathmen. It is a large tiered platform with 3 sets of stairs leading to the central level, where finally in the north a steep stair takes us to the high dais, where we can find the nexus of purpose regarding the structure, a lightning attractor rod, standing straight and proud, taunting the stirring storm above, begging for a violet bolt to flash and strike. As with the others, there is a gem holder at the base. If we place a soul gem within it, a pure and purposeful finger of lightning will strike, mystically converting the soul gem into the much more valuable, useful, and of course outlawed black soul gem. The rod will now be dropped into the base of the dais, and we will be unable to perform this ritual again. We should scoop up our black soul gem and be off, before something has our head off. And speaking of heads, if we head to the due west from the lightning attractor, we'll find a single structure filling our entire scope of vision. A huge keep with many interesting wings, walls, and levels to be pried and explored. This is the Master's Keep, guarded by many undead comprised of Bonemen, Mistmen, and Wrathmen. 3 huge bulwarks come together in a U-shape, allowing the unattended courtyard to be open to all. A seemingly unformulated mixture of dirt, grass, paved paths, columns, and soul wells have been stirred geometrically to create this open forecourt. In the northeasternmost corner of the courtyard, there lies a rather out-of-place item. It's a steel war axe of frost. Don't ask me why that's there. Above it all, there rocks and rotates an ideal master, swaying in stunted lazy heaves and swings like levitation is a chore. Inside the central chamber, there is a stairwell that ascends to the west, up onto the parapetless upper walkways, where Bonemen archers stand guard, joints clattering and clinking, ready to knock and loose a fell shaft onto any who would invade this keep without invite. At the very end of the rooftop, there is a chest with a sack leaning against it. Inside the sack, we'll discover 8 harvested soul husks, which we'll take and trade with Morven later. Inside the chest, we'll find an unsurprising and limited selection of random leveled loot. If we head back down the stairs into the dark and dimly lit chamber from whence we came, over against the eastern wall by the lower window, we'll see there is a teleporter, luring us to it, with its effulgency in the stale darkness. When we step into it, we'll be teleported onto the roof of the keep, where we'll be faced with an ideal master. As always, if you get too close, it will begin to swallow down our soul, like a starved black hole, until we're nothing more than a singularity in its soul stash. Naturally, we'll want to steer clear of such an entity, but there is a chest below the ideal master, and one that we'll want to loot, as inside, along with an abundant stash of random leveled loot, we'll also find our second Reaper Gem fragment. We'll need to be sure to take this for later on in the video. As for now though, we'll need to make like the Green Pact and leave. Wandering on directly south, we'll come across the Minaret of Marrow, a monolithic column deserving of the descriptor tower as it reaches into the twisting nether above, the upper section shattered and whirling in a blistering fountain of soul energy. Down below at the base of the black bulging spire, we'll see a lot of intriguing indicators. 4 souls stand enslaved, tethered to the tower by engorged strands of soul arcana. Throned at the center is a keeper in his dragonbone armor with his flurrying void head and glowing soul eyes. If we approach, he will arise and meet us face to face, weapon drawn, clashing in open battle where an epic duel will commence. A warning though, that battle axe is longer than it looks. As the keeper is double our size, so too is his weapon. Now assuming that we are the victor, and best the keeper, on his corpse we'll find nothing more than a black soul gem. Also, once the keeper is defeated, the 4 souls will vanish, deactivating the second of 3 keeper spells that maintain the barrier around the boneyard, just as we experienced with the twisting spire earlier on in the video. We'll get to that later, as for now, we'll be off. Off to the east, a short skip and a hop, and our steps will be slowed as we peer up to find a crooked and bent pocket-sized chapel. A soul well sits next to it, beaming away. If we try and enter, we'll find that 3 of the openings are semi-blocked by lazily stacked bricks of black stone. Through the open side, we'll see a meager little shrine placed at the back. A rather unexciting sight, until we notice that sleeping in the shadows, there is a magical manual resting atop the flickering altar. This is the spell tome Conjure. If we pick it up, we'll be able to find it in our book tab. Simply activate it to learn the spell. It summons a Rathman from the soul can for 60 seconds wherever the caster is pointing. A lovely new spell to add to your collection, especially if you wish to dabble in the dark arts of necromancy. Who placed this spell tome here and why? That's a question too difficult to answer, impossible almost. I'm interested to hear your thoughts as I have none. Let's just take it with us and turn to the next page of the soul can. Moving to the southeasternmost corner of the soul can, a place few have tread, at the end of a slinking porcelain path leading to the edge of the explorable realm, we will follow the trail to its place of perish, where we will find the Lost Nord, a skeleton slumped up against the large boulder in the bracken. Adorning the scene like wilder flowers sprouting from a forgotten grave, there are a few olden belongings left for us to investigate. Slipped over the skull of the body is an ancient Nord helmet, quite clearly informing us that this person was a Nord, and one from many millennia past. Resting by their hand is their weapon, a steel greatsword of cowardice, which is ironic as a coward is the last thing this person was wandering into the soul can alone. Stupid perhaps, but cowardice? No. Placed on the other side, scrolled with dying quill strokes, are their final words. Lying on top of a small rock, there is the note from the soul can. They warned me not to go through that portal. What did I have to be scared of? I've been adventuring for years and never seen nothing I couldn't wallop. But this place ain't nothing living here. Just dead things up and about when they should be in the ground. I can hear their bones scratching at the rocks and knocking together when they walk. If I get home, I'll hang up my sword and never go out again. Sounds like me when I wake up hungover. I'm never drinking again. That night at the pub, 14 beers deep. Adventurers never stop adventuring, unless they get an arrow in the knee. Now, in a completely judgmental sense, just by deducing the sloppy structure of that letter, it's quite clear that this person wasn't the sharpest axe in the armory. But then again, I would imagine most ancient Nord adventurers were not well versed in the fine-tuning of syntax within linguistics. And to be fair, neither am I. Now, who exactly this person was, I can't seem to put a finger on. There are no old tales of a Nord adventurer vanishing into a portal, but it's interesting to think how they got here, who made that portal that they entered, and why. They are also one of a few people who tread through the soul can as a mortal. There aren't many examples of that. Now, as we inspect this calcified Nordic fossil, our ears will prick, alarmed by kvetching cartilage, crooked, creaking, and tortured, as clusters of clambering corpses climb from all cursed corners. Surrounded by Rathman, swaying with ligamentless twitches. No doubt we share the same final damning vision this here Nord once submitted unto, a sad defeat short of Elysian. Accepting death and eternal damnation as the cackling corpses congregate with clamped teeth and moulded pelvis screech. We'll scoop up his sword and hang it upon a tavern wall once we return to snowy Skyrim, and let some wailing minstrel quill a lackadaisical ballad to remember him. We should leave, never look back, and abandon these remains in the depths and dust of oblivion. Trekking purposefully to the northwest, we'll find ourselves at the Well of Wealth, a courtyard paved and tiled with heavy black brick, cracked and bent by the deathly weather in the realm. Standing guard is a Boneman protecting the exiguous and exposed Exchequer. At the center of the square is a soul well beaming bright, fueled by tormented souls. Swirling playfully in a circle around the glowing pit, bobbing childlike, is a whispering spirit, flirting with our scant sense of security. On the ground, next to the soul well, is a handful of items: an iron dagger of cowardice, a glass shield, a potent magicka poison, and a grand soul gem. There are also 2 common soul gems, a laughing skull, and a singular page, which, as you may have guessed, is one of Jiub's Opus pages, specifically number 5. Be sure to grab that for later. Overall though, it's rather odd for a pile of loot to be sat in such a spot, out in the open. Unless, of course, rather like the Whispering Spirit, these have been placed here to reel us in, like an angler's prawned hook to the gulping maw of a comestably curious turbot. Hand-feeding our greed, we too are sure to soon end begot. Siren-like in shining silent song, drawing us in, enmeshed and fed on jewels we hunger, drooling like fools over this here ideal master's pile of plunder. We must take the page and be swift in our exit before we too become ensnared in the booby trap of wealth laid before us on this blackened stoned platter in this desolate realm of grave dust. Now, while we venture through the bemusing fields, our feet chaw muffled against the arid loam, we'll spot a toppled steeple, long lost to structural purpose, half swallowed by the soul silt. Frankly, it's quite a quotidian sight for the soul can, but upon a closer inspection, amidst the rubble, there lies an object that seems out of place, foreign to this foreign plane. It's from Owls, from Mundus. It's an elven sword of lightning which rests lost and forgotten. There is no skeleton nearby enough to conclude as the once owner. Likely they were inside the now shattered steeple as it collapsed, claiming their life and leaving only this trace of them ever being here. Given its elvish in nature, I'd only assume that it belonged to an elf. Now, which elf, which race, who they were, what their name was, how long their ears were, or what they were doing here is all up for debate. Although I'm certain it would tippy-toe in the sphere of necromancy and dire dealings with the ideal masters. All we can do now to make certain their memory lives on is take the sword for ourselves. There's really nothing elves we can do, apart from emancipate this blade from lying beneath the shattered steeple's uncalculated mantle shelves. Migrating further to the east, we'll find ourselves trotting towards a large collection of towers and arches. This is the Preternatural Plaza, a massive quadrangle possessing unnatural qualities and devices, erected from what would seem to be a schematic designed by Dice Roll. As if no living being pieced this together, it's like an attempt at imitation, a structural simulacrum, walls with no purpose, stairs in random spots, steeples and tiled gallerias standing haphazardly. Amongst this randomness at the center, however, there is a rugged rostrum, at the top of which lies a mystical mechanism, a lightning rod attractor. As with the others, there is a soul gem holder at the base, and if we place a soul gem within it, a pure and purposeful finger of lightning will strike. With an infernal thaumaturgy, the roll of thunder peals back, and as the silence rakes our very being, the bolt from above crashes down, converting the soul gem into the much more valuable, useful, and of course outlawed, black soul gem. A dark magic to be sure, but undeniably useful, as soul gems are extremely rare and make necromancy more flexible. An indirect gift from the ideal masters. But even now, as it sits empty, the dark radiance of the black soul gem is haunting. We should collect our gem and make haste in our parting before the overseers of oblivion seek payment. Commencing a merry sojourn to the northwest in the bare and cripplingly Sumerian Evercrofts, we'll see something rather kitsch that contrasts brilliantly with the surroundings. There is a soul who appears to quite clearly be a farmer, who is ironically a reaped soul reaping soul husks in a realm of soul reapers. Wrap your head around that. But along with the tongue twister, there is also something ever so interesting here too, that being the 2 cow souls. Now this alone is curious, as throughout the Soul Cairn we see hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions, tenduo-trigantillions, yes that's a number, of animal bones, bones of beasts from horizon to horizon, yet we never once see the soul of an animal. Surely we'd either see all the souls of animals or none of the souls of animals. Why are there none at all, besides these 2 cows? No doubt they were torn from Mundus with a farmer, but so was Morven Stroud with his horse and cart. We see the skeletons of mammoths everywhere. Where are their souls? How did these 2 cows manage to end up here, grazing eternally off gravelled, untoiled soil? A curse to be sure, but a curious one that I cannot explain. But along with the cows and back to the farmer, he has a little patch of soul husks, which I guess makes sense. All he knew was farming. Then he found himself here for eternity, in a place where nothing grows, except for soul husks. It makes sense that he'd start farming them. This is, however, a grand opportunity for us to collect handfuls and handfuls of soul husks and troll them back to Morven Stroud in exchange for magical goods. So be sure to reap soul husks from the reaping reaped soul in the realm of soul reapers, then reap and repeat. Frolicking to the northeast in the macabre and unmoistened moors of the Soul Cairn, we'll find a tall and hollow tower. This is the Spineless Spire, comprised of sets of stairs curling high into the purple abyss above, stacked upon one another, scantily clothed in tattered cerulean bolts. Guarding each landing are varying undead, ready to protect the guard post and stop all who would climb with a gravely halt. About halfway up, we'll spot a book resting in a strange place on the ledge of the tower, begging to be blown by a gust of wind. This is a copy of the ever-common The Book of Life and Service that we find lying around the Soul Cairn. There's no worth in us taking it with us. Now upon the crowning floor, we'll be met by a Wrathman, ready to battle intruders within his watchtower. Interestingly, on the ground level of the tower, there is actually a teleporter, and if we stand within it, we'll be taken straight to the top. A sure way to save weary legs and unnecessary ascent, as throughout this stepped spire, there is absolutely nothing interesting. Just more undead, and a hell of a walk. Almost as if this is some kind of prank set by the Ideal Masters to lure and tire adventurers, letting our curiosities force us to corkscrew up into the sky only to wind back down to the ground exhausted. So much potential with so little to offer. A true annoyance for any true adventurer. Now just a skip and a hop to the north, we'll find a huge soul well, venting wisps and strands of ghostly soul energy glowing bright in the evernight. But as you may have noticed, there is also an Orcish encampment here. 3 Orcish souls have taken this soul well as their campfire, huddling and milling around the place. They are all heavily armored and equipped with deadly weapons, suggesting that they were doing battle when they were torn from Mundus and spewed into the detritus-ridden Soul Cairn. Surely quite a task for a necromancer of any skill to pull 3 orcs into oblivion at once. But it doesn't end there, oh no. If we follow the Orcish soul that patrols to the edge of the camp, just a silt strider's step away, there is a dragon skeleton with quite a story to tell, as lying on the ground in the rough grey marl, there are 2 Orcish arrows. These would appear to have once been lodged into the side of the dragon. There is a 3rd arrow on the other side, near the eye. Now if we take a look at the head, we'll see a very clear cause of death. A great Orcish battle axe sits violently embedded into the Dover's skull, splitting the beast's head in twain. It would seem that this dragon was beaten and defeated by this band of bandit orcs. A very interesting find indeed, but it does not explain how all 3 orcs, along with the body of a dragon, were ripped through space from Mundus and into oblivion. That is truly quite the feat, even for a master necromancer. Perhaps it was the same one who brought the dragon and the Nord that we saw at the start of the video. But I guess, as with most of the Soul Cairn, we'll never truly know. Trudging to the northeast, we'll see a raised block of stone, bent and crooked in the shifting soul sands. At the base of the stairs that lead higher, there are two mistmen floating guard with eyes locked atop the massive altar. Following their gaze, ascending with each step as cautious and curious as the last, we'll find it mostly bare, but at the back there is a collection of worthy eye-catchers just over there. As we close in, a mistman will pop up and greet us with glowing eye sockets and a ribbed fountain of nameless grave dust. Passing him to the treasure we saw and seek, a candle-lit shrine flickers in praise to an unknown bearer. At the base we can find a petty soul gem, a coin purse and a piece of paper. This is Jiub's Opus page 7. We'll be sure to tuck that into our pocket to read for later. But there is another text around this dais of disease and death we will want to get a hold of. It rests on top of the shrine. This is the spell tome Conjure Mistman. If we pick it up, we'll be able to find it in our book tab, simply activating it to learn the spell. It summons a Mistman from the Soul Can for 60 seconds, wherever the caster is pointing. A lovely new spell to add to your collection, especially if you wish to dabble in the dark arts of necromancy. Now, who placed this spell tome here and why? Who even made this spell tome? That is a question difficult to answer, impossible even. I am interested to hear your thoughts, as I have none. For now though, let's just take it with us. But the fact that it is a spell tome for Summon Mistman surely explains why the whole surrounding zone is littered with them. It sure solves that mystery, or in this case, mistmanery. Moving to the northwest, we'll fall under the darkening grips of a penumbral monolith that shades the lands. As we slowly tilt our heads back, our eyes wide, as we take in the horrifying and magnificent sight before us. This is the floating arch tower of the Keeper, a citadel locked in space, spinning in destruction, with an unusually high level of lightning casting down upon the surrounding area from the accursed base of the ungodly Sky Fortress. Atop the foundations of black earth stone is a squared tower crowned with one of the few twisting soul spires in the Soul Can, with shattered blocks warping as cursed florid aureole rages in burning bright soul sacrifice, beaming through the gaps in the broken brick, truly an ideal master's paradise. Beneath the mimic infernal city are many undead clomping around in praise and eternal servitude, as they once said. On the ground beneath the floating arch tower, we will see there are 3 columns standing proud, directly underneath the center of the mass above. As we approach it, the air is heavy with electricity. Static lingers like fog, clinging to our soul, like a toad in a storm to a log. Our skin will tingle and our hair will dance with micro crackle. Amidst the 3 columns there is a centerpiece, a luminescent violet circle, a teleporter, and with brave step, if we leap into it, we'll be transported up into the floating arch tower, to the base of a high climb with many steps to come. Ascending into the sky to the next landing, we'll find 4 souls, bound by a keeper, to the soul spire atop the floating arch tower. Oath-locked and serving they stand, having their very essence drained to fuel the barrier ritual to the boneyard. This, however, is the last of the 3, so we must find the keeper. To the western side, there is another stair that leads higher to the final D-roofed mezzanine. We'll find a keeper of the bow. As with the others, he is an absolute unit, towering above the Dragonborn, clad in dragon bone armor with matching bow and arrows. With a ferocious, pulsing purple void with gleaming amethyst eyes in place of a head, we must do battle and slay this brute, a task only fit for those well prepared, as the Keeper's arrows strike hard and true. Once he is defeated, however, on his ghostly remains we will find nothing more than a black soul gem. Once again, like the others, the 4 spirits that were bound to the tower will now have vanished, and being the 3rd and final barrier ritual to be stopped, the magical walls surrounding the boneyard will now have been lowered, and we can enter the Heart Fortress, which we will do soon enough. But for now, on this same level, we can find another teleporter. Walking into it will throw us back at the bottom, like Trinimac being expelled from Boethia. Now like a mimic Malakath we leave, and feel the dim light brighten around us as we exit from the umbral shadow cast by the devilish construct above us. To the west we'll see a moderately sized structure fashioned in the classic mismatched Solcan motif, where no two parts seem to have been built with any specific purpose or end vision in mind. This is the Master's Lookout. On the ground level there is a doorway that leads into a croft. Inside here are stairs that lead to the lookout where the Master sits. Guarding these stairs is a Wrathman, although it goes unsaid that the ideal Masters most certainly do not need any kind of protection while inside their realm. As we step into the outside, be warned, as the ideal Master will begin to siphon our very being, sucking our soul through our flesh and into its endless store of soul energy. We must be swift in our actions. Underneath the floating crystalline figure is a chest. At the base of this there is the Book of Life and Service, the same one we read earlier and have stumbled upon since. Inside the chest there is an assortment of expected random leveled loot, and the third and final Reaper Gem fragment, which we'll be taking for later on. For now though, we'll want to get the hell out of the ideal Master's grips and break free from the tethering tentacles of arcane spirit reaping beams that cling to our anima. From afar we can admire the sight and grandeur of the ideal Master as we walk away with his goods in our possession. Heading to the west, we'll reach the outer reaches of the Boneyard. Glued to the main bulwark on the eastern face is this spiked outhouse redoubt, cathedral-like in motif and crypt-like in gothic atmosphere. While there are side steps, the center houses a huge reaching staircase that leads straight up to the heart of the shivering chateau, populated by souls who seem nothing short of extremely bored, sitting around doing nothing, wistfully leaning on walls and no doubt milling endlessly over how they could have avoided the events that led them to being here, a fate almost as torturous as eternal servitude. Buzzing about like a drunken bee on a warm spring afternoon is a whispering spirit darting back and forth, enjoying whatever it's doing. There is a small series of polished stone steps that lead up to a shadowy mausoleum, inside of which, buried at the back in a pile of bones, is a small chest. Inside here we'll find our much anticipated collection of random leveled loot. But interestingly, on the ground in front of the chest are two oxidized chunks of silver ore. Don't know why they're here, but it seems that everything has a silver lining. Along with them there is also a piece of paper. You guessed it, this is Jiub's Opus page number 4. We'll be sure to tuck that into our satchel and save it for later. Now though, we'll leave this place, and with it the lazy souls meandering aimlessly, locked in an eternity of misery. For now, it is time to migrate to the central north of the Solcan, as we have defeated all 3 keepers and valiantly deactivated the Aegis ritual. The barriers are down, and we can now enter the heart of the accessible Solcan, the Boneyard. A huge walled citadel decorated majestically with towers, parapets, bartizans, steeples, soul spires, and other ghostly knickknacks and architectural designs. Following the Nightstone pathway, we'll be faced by a huge ebonwood portcullis, strapped with black iron bands and rivets. Entering through here, we'll exit into the courtyard of the Boneyard, a truly stunning and brilliant sight, no matter how damning we know it is. The huge bulwark that lines the perimeter is bound in the corners by soul spires, blazing blindingly with planes worth of soul energy. Strangely, one of the soul spires at the back has no glow, suggesting it's not performing properly, but given we don't really know what their purpose is anyway, it's sure hard to say. Nonetheless, it's a worthy observation in obscurity and curiosity. Now the ground is blanketed with thick black grass painted with milky mists, like piercing fingers of rising corpses from their graves puncturing the earth's surface are tombstones, scattered about in this ancient gravesite. A number of undead patrol the grounds. Now in the eastern corner we can find Valerica's alchemical laboratory. Here lies an absolute dream for any apothecary, a prismatic serving platter of ingredients and potions to play with. including 2 Nightshade, a draft of Resist Fire, a draft of Resist Frost, a draft of Resist Magic, a Death Bell, 2 pairs of Ice Wraith Teeth, a solution of Vigor, Fire Salts, Frost Salts, Vampire Dust, 3 Soul Husk Extracts, 1 Soul Husk, more Vampire Dust, an Elixir of Extra Magicka, an Elixir of Lasting Potency, a Potion of Vigorous Healing, a Salt Pile, a Blacksmith's Elixir, an Enchanter's Elixir, 2 Bowls of Bone Meal, 2 more Soul Husks, Void Salts, Glow Dust, another Soul Husk Extract, 2 rolls of paper, 2 Bone Meal, and yet another pile of Vampire Dust, along with 5 books: On Oblivion, authored by Maurian Zenas, The Book of Life and Service, authored by an unknown, The Effects of the Elder Scrolls, authored by Justinius Polonius, Magic from the Sky, authored by Erlav Jarol, and Immortal Blood, authored by someone simply signed off as Anonymous. A truly tantalizing assortment of goods for an adventurer of any persuasion. Now, the Soul Husk Extract cannot be made by the player, but only by Valerica, who will require that we trade her 5 Soul Husks for her to brew the extract. Inside the lavish case is also an Elder Scroll, which you can see more of in my full video explaining the true nature of the Elder Scrolls within the Elder Scrolls games. For us now though, we'll head back out into the Boneyard. Now, you may have noticed the king of the castle, an undead dragon named Durnehviir, who has been tricked and trapped here by the Ideal Masters to guard Valerica. We will have to fight him during the Dawnguard main questline, but not now, as we're here for exploration and discovery, not violence. But here is something very, very curious and annoyingly unsolvable. Here in the Boneyard, there are 2 chests, both on rooftops. One is on the podium where Durnehviir is perched, and the other is on a roof behind it. Both contain random leveled soul can loot, as we would expect, but they are both completely inaccessible without the use of console commands or some serious glitching. I do believe it is an unfinished feature, as there are soul wells all over the place, which as we know are sometimes actually teleporters. But after jumping and standing in each and every one of them, none were in fact teleporters. So there is no way to get up to these chests. They've just been placed here and left to confuse the avid explorer like you and I. And while I like chests of all shapes and sizes, I refuse to spend another second trying to figure out how to get my hands on these 2. We'll just have to admire them from afar, as it's time for us to move onto the antepenultimate curiosity within the Soul Can. Now, at some point during our travels in the Soul Can, we'll run across this lost soul.
You must help me find my Arvak. He doesn't deserve to be in a place like this.
Calm down, dude. Who's Arvak?
Arvak, my horse. We came to this horrible place together. We were attacked by monsters, so I told him to run. Please, he's such a loyal creature, and he's been running for so long. You have to save him. A place like this will change you.
Well, how can I help him? Give him a carrot? What do you want me to do?
Arvak! Arvak! Where are you? Arvak, please come back! Come back!
What? What do you mean, Well, that was punctual, I guess. Now again, while wandering around the Soul Can and after talking to that soul, we can actually witness Arvak spring into existence, prance around a little, then fade back into the nothingness. Now, to complete this tale, we must make our way to the central northeast of the Soul Can, rather near the camp of orcs we met earlier. Here, there is a single lank archway with a super glow purple light within it. There are 4 spirits with their hands raised. They seem to be praying or praising this shrine at the center. Atop it is a horse skull, but no normal horse skull, nay. This is Arvak's skull, and just as his once owner proclaimed, the Soul Can does seem to have changed him. Curious as to why these souls have chosen to perform this ritualistic ceremony of hand-waving and knee-scraping towards the skull. Perhaps they're aware that Arvak's the best mount in the game. But be warned, as we approach, the worshipping zealots to Arvak's skull will be unmasked and reveal their true form. All 4 of them are Mistmen, and will attack us in an attempt to protect the skull from us. They are vehement in denying that we complete our quest, destroy them, and take Arvak's skull. Upon doing so, his owner will appear once more.
Arvak! You saved him! His soul is free, I can feel it! He's such a loyal beast. Here, I'll teach you how to call him to you. He'll help you get around this wretched place. But I'm sure he'd be much happier someplace sunnier. Goodbye, hero. Take good care of Arvak for me. Such a good horse.
Cheers, Cobber, and now we will have been taught the spell Summon Arvak, which does just that. It summons our very own undead indigo flaming skeleton horse. It's pretty cool, and now we're ready to stir up trouble, son. Now the really cool thing about Arvak is even if he dies, we can just resummon him. In my opinion, this makes him the most superior mount in the game. So be sure to have some fun with your new steed. For now though, let's gallop down to the penultimate curiosity for this video. All the way down in the southeasternmost corner of the Soul Cairn we can find it, the Reaper's Lair. A structure unique in shape and design, oddly short when compared to the other monoliths and abstract obelisks and castles around the place. It has very strange roofing modelled from some kind of star, with a geometrically hermetic motif, painted with the gothic overtones of arches and spikes. The front door is thick and crafted from heavy blackened wood, braced tight with black iron bands and heavy nails driven deep like those in a coffin. If we simply push the door, we may enter, but we'll feel a breeze as the studded slammer softly seals behind us, and we tread through the narthex. The candles each and either side convulse with a diseased lambency. A rich vein of ghast runs deep through the node of quietude and bolt that flashbang through the pierceless darkness of the penumbral chamber's nave. We find ourselves in darkness, unable to glimpse the true magnitude of the auditorium, as each rocketing thunder fades, whispering a threnody, leaving us in silence and darkness to wonder anxious the horrors that surround us. With clear focus and composure, we can gain back our senses and see what's in here. At the center of the room is what would appear to be a teleporter, although this is inaccessible. In front of it, however, is a pedestal. If we interact with it, the 3 Reaper fragments we collected throughout our journey in the Soul Cairn will be sucked from our inventory, and as 3 they were collected, as 3 they come. The trio of crystal shards will float purposefully as lightning crashes around us. This is where we meet horror incarnate. From the bone wall at the back of the room, a nonpareil figure will emerge, along with 4 bonemen from the bone piles at the sides of the chamber. This ghostly executioner is known simply as the Reaper, and he will be hostile. So be prepared for a strange fight, as the Reaper's main offensive maneuver is to spew green slime onto us, something I do believe to be a Ghostbusters reference. And despite him wielding that huge axe that could easily cut us in two like sheer Gorath to a cheese wheel, he does not attack with it, and will only block with the mighty axe, making this elusive, occult, arcane, and otherwise epic encounter a bit lackluster. Now the Reaper does have a rather unique appearance, with an aubergine mist that pulses from his torso, lined silver in a transparent ghostly way, and bright eyes that fade to red. As unique as he is, crush him, and upon his defeat is where it gets really interesting, as on his corpse we can find the iron battle axe which he wields but doesn't really use. We can find 3 black soul gems, and ever so strangely a Daedra heart. Now, who has Daedra hearts? Yeah, that's right, Daedra have Daedra hearts. Does this mean the Reaper is actually a type of Daedra? Given he also carries black soul gems, well, that would suggest that he's actually a creation of the Ideal Masters, fueled and powered by those black soul gems, although that's strange because there's 3 of them. Now, as far as we are aware with the teachings from current lore, Daedra have no place within the Soul Cairn, and the Ideal Masters do not perform dealings with them. So why does the Reaper, an assumed slave and even creation of the Ideal Masters, carry a Daedra heart? I've never seen or heard of any type of Daedra that matches his appearance. He's even ghostly and see-through, like an undead. and apart from the Daedra Heart, I would never suspect that he is one. It's very curious indeed and something to think about before you sleep. But now that has been dealt with, we can have a look around at the rest of the penumbral chamber. As we saw, the Reaper spews green goo. This is actually a reused attack from the Afflicted from Periite's questline. But in this case, I do believe it to be some kind of ectoplasm, specifically in reference to that from the Ghostbusters movies, as the ghosts in those movies leave green slime on stuff, and in the Soul Cairn we do find some other Ghostbusters references paired with the fact that we don't see any other ghostly creature in Skyrim perform such an attack, naturally leading me to conclude that yes, it is a Ghostbusters reference. Now it would seem that the Reaper has been using this green slime before, as in the piles of bones lining the ossuary we can find pools and splatters of the green goo. Also strangely, there are a few drips that come from the roof, and they are nothing other than this green goo too. Has the Reaper been spraying his green loads all over the place? I truly hope not. Now the Reaper gem fragments will remain floating above the pedestal and the lightning will continue to crash down from the electrified void roof. As for now though, it's time to leave this crypt of oddities and make our way to the ultimate curiosity in the Soul Cairn. In the central east of the realm, we can find a single soul standing and muttering to himself, pacing back and forth with a burnt-out campfire at the center of the clearing. He has much to say and might just rile up some memories for older Elder Scrolls players.
Damn it, how could I be so foolish? When I rewrite those pages, they'll see what they missed. Did I start with my ride on the prison ship, or was it before that? Now, what was it I said to that prisoner? Stand up. There you go. You're dreaming. Yes, that was it. Did I call it the Great Hunt? Or was it just the Hunt? I can't remember. Was it between the forces of good and evil? No, that's not it. And without any regard for my safety, I fearlessly charged the enemy. No, much too dramatic. Savior of Morrowind. That's good, but it sounds too narrow of scope. Was it having the adoration of thousands? No, wait. I could make it the adoration of tens of thousands. I wonder how many copies I'll sell. Hundreds? Thousands? I'll hire the finest bookbinder I can find. Once I get it done, first I'll publish a regular edition, then the folio. I'll be rich.
For those who don't know Jiub, he is the first character that you meet in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. He wakes us up on the prison ship and we give our character's name to him.
They have taken you from the Imperial City's prison, first by carriage and now by boat. To the east, to Morrowind. Fear not, for I am watchful. You have been chosen.
Wake up. We're here. Why are you shaking? Are you okay? Wake up. Stand up. There you go. You were dreaming. What's your name? Well, not even last night's storm could wake you. I heard them say we've reached Morrowind. I'm sure they'll let us go. Quiet. Here comes the guard.
This is where you get off. Come with me.
You better do what they say.
I've saved him for last in this video because he's the first thing I ever saw in an Elder Scrolls game. So it seems fitting to have him send off the Curating Curiosities series for Skyrim. Now once we leave him at the start of the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, we never see him again. So we do have much to discuss. G'day mate.
What do you want? Good riddance.
Oi, what exactly are you doing?
How does anyone expect me to write my opus with all of these rude interruptions?
Tell me about it. Opus? What opus?
What do I mean, indeed? If I hadn't lost all of the pages, I wouldn't be in this predicament, and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Wake up, you're dreaming. Nah, jokes, you're totally dead. Let's start from the beginning.
Very well. I suppose a moment or two of my time couldn't hurt.
I'm actually bleeding from this.
I am Jiub. Some call me Saint Jiub. Others call me Jiub the Eradicator. Perhaps you've heard of me.
I have heard of you, but that's not an option apparently.
I can't say that I'm surprised by your answer. Until I get my second volume published, no one will ever know of my achievements.
You're talking about a book, right?
A book? I'd hardly call a 26-volume epic simply a book.
I'd call it one of my scripts.
Surely you've heard of The Rise and Fall of Saint Jiub the Eradicator, hero of Morrowind and savior of the Durnehviir.
Maybe a title that you can say in one breath is in order?
Maybe you should leave the writing to an expert. Stop making foolish suggestions.
Yeah, point made. How's your work going?
Terrible. Simply terrible. I was in the midst of writing the second volume, and they just threw me into this prison. It's unfair.
Who threw you in here exactly?
That damned Remora and his minions. They didn't even give me a chance to explain who I was.
A Dremora captured you?
Well, I assume so. It cast a spell at me from some kind of strange black crystal. Next thing I knew, I arrived here.
Oh, buddy, your soul was trapped.
My what? Wait. That means...
Yeah, you're dead as a Dwemer.
No. All these wasted months? Or has it been years? I don't even remember how much time has passed. No, my work will never see the light of day. My name will be forgotten.
Could I help at all?
Perhaps. Do you have a way out of here?
I do, but you can't leave that way.
Maybe I can't leave, but my writings can. In order to write the second volume of my opus, I need the notes from my first volume. Otherwise, I need to do all of this from memory.
How many pages did you lose?
When I was tossed in here, I felt myself falling, and I dropped the pages I had been holding. There were 10 of them in all. Find them for me, please. I beg you.
Now, remember all those pages that we picked up along the way? Well, those are Jiub's Opus pages. We'll get to those soon enough, but for now, let's talk to Jiub some more. So tell me, how'd you earn your nickname?
Ah, yes. Saint Jiub, Jiub the Eradicator, Jiub the Magnificent. I've earned a lot of those titles thanks to my campaign against the Winged Menace.
The Winged Menace?
Yes, I'm speaking of the Cliff Racer, of course. Wretched things. They used to crisscross the skies over Morrowind like vermin. Nasty flying creatures with a habit of sneaking up on the unwary.
What was your campaign against them?
After I was freed from prison, I decided to turn my life around. Give something back to the people of Morrowind. It became quickly apparent that the best way I could help would be by wiping out the Cliff Racers.
Were you successful?
Indeed I was. I hunted down and killed every last one of them. Took years. The people of Morrowind were so grateful to have the roads safer again, they took to calling me Saint Jiub, and then the other names followed.
You mentioned you were in prison.
That was a dark time in my life. I did a lot of things I ended up regretting. Maybe that's why I worked so hard to redeem myself once I was freed.
What did you do?
I murdered others for money. And before you think I belong to some romantic or secretive guild, think again. I was simply an addict who needed money for skooma. The stuff wasn't cheap, and murder always seemed to be in demand.
How'd you get caught?
I finally bit off more than I could chew. I was paid to assassinate some high-ranking official from House Redoran. What I didn't know is someone had hired the Morag Tong to kill him as well.
Ah, rival assassin.
Exactly. He got to my target first and called the guard to cover his tracks. By the time I got there, the place was on alert. Walked right into a trap and didn't even realize it until I was captured.
So what ended up happening to you?
They tried me for murder, threw me on a prison ship, and sent me to the jail in Vivek City. Gave me a lot of time to think, that's for sure.
Why would a Dremora attack you?
Well, that's a ridiculous question. Everyone traveling through here has said that the Oblivion Gates have been opening all over Tamriel.
That's a bit before my time.
Has it been that long? Oh my. Well, it started with the followers of Mehrunes Dagon having Emperor Uriel Septim VII assassinated. Without a Septim on the throne of the Empire, Dagon was able to leave Oblivion through the gates and attack.
How was Dagon able to do that?
All I heard is that without a Septim sitting on the throne of the Empire, the dragon fires in a place called the Temple of the One were no longer lit. This meant that we were vulnerable to the forces of Oblivion.
What ended up happening?
Well, I don't know. Everything seemed fine until that Dremora attacked me. I only heard later about the gates from the other souls. I can only assume the gates have been closed by now.
Where were you captured?
I had just moved from my ancestral home in Morrowind to the continent of Cyrodiil. I settled in the city of Kvatch to write my memoirs and to find some peace and quiet.
Is that where you were attacked?
Indeed. One moment I was writing diligently, and the next my door bursts open. It was a cadre of Dremora. The city was under attack. I took it upon myself to join the cause and fight the Dremora, thinking this would simply be another feather in my cap.
Didn't work out that way, I assume?
The reason I'm standing in front of you as only a whisper of my former self should tell you that. I never knew what became of Kvatch. I wonder if they were triumphant without me.
They were. And you know what, Jiub? Here are all of your pages.
Finally! I never thought I'd see these again. These pages meant the world to me. Thank you.
So now what?
Now Volume 2 begins. What else?
Well, good luck. I guess I'll be off.
Oh, wait a moment. Here, I want you to have these before you go. A pristine copy of my first volume. Only one in print, actually. And take this as well. Seeing as St. Jiub has ascended to pure spiritual form, I won't need it any longer.
Aw, thanks, Jiub. So Jiub will have now given us the Locket of St. Jiub, which is one of the best necklaces in the game in my opinion, providing armor, carry weight, and stamina, and it's one of only 2 necklaces in the game to have an armor rating. And we'll also have the only copy of St. Jiub's Opus. And now that it's all together, we can finally read it. The Rise and Fall of St. Jiub the Eradicator, hero of Morrowind and savior of the Dunmer. I am a hunter, I am a redeemer, I am Jiub. The tale of my rise to glory begins in the ash wastes of Morrowind. I rode alone, weapon at my side and the burning wind stinging my face. My quest was arduous, but necessary to ensure the survival of the Dunmer people. A pestilence was creeping across the Ashlands, a menace with an insatiable hunger that plagued innocent travelers simply trying to get home. It was my self-sworn task to hunt them down one by one and drive them from the skies. Their fury knew no bounds, and their war cry resonated across the land. They were the notorious cliff racers, and they had to be destroyed. On a particularly hot day during the sun's height, I was tracking what I called a lingerer, a cliff racer without a nest. He was a particularly feisty one too, leading me on a merry chase across almost 3 miles of ash dunes. I had managed to take a piece out of one of his wings in an earlier scuffle, so he couldn't maintain much of a climb. But he still had quite a bit of stamina left, and he was trying to make me tire of the chase. Almost 2 solid hours passed, and my silt strider was tiring, but I couldn't give in. I had sworn to eliminate the foul beasts to the last, and I wasn't going to let it go. If I was going to stop the thing, I'd have to do it fast. I pulled my longbow back and knocked my last arrow. I took a deep breath and pulled, trying to keep the cliff racer in my sights. It was literally a long shot, with the beast gaining distance and the silt strider bouncing me around at full gallop. Finally, with a silent prayer, I released the string. The arrow sang through the air like a howling demon as it sliced its way towards its target. Finally, just as it crested the lip of a foyada, the arrow struck in the midsection. It let out a horrible cry and fell out of sight. My cries of triumph were quickly stifled by the sound of over 100 wings. Rising from the foyada was an entire colony of cliff racers, and they were out for blood. The blasted thing had led me right to their nest and sacrificed itself with the intent of feeding me to its brood. It was a trap. The damned things had become much too clever. Knowing this was likely the end, I jumped down from the silt strider and hit the back of its legs with the flat of my glass blade. There was no need for the innocent thing to die here today because of my stupidity. As the ash cloud cleared from being stirred up by its massive legs, the cliff racer brood approached. I held my sword high and prepared for the worst. The battle lasted 2 full days. I was beaten, clawed, bitten, and knocked down more times than I cared to remember. In the end, 76 cliff racers were slaughtered. I was knee-deep in their corpses and my body on the verge of collapse, but I had survived. I smiled to the heavens and all went black. When I awoke, all I felt was my back on a cold stone floor. Every muscle in my body was on fire and my vision was blurred. Slowly, I tried to climb to my feet. It took several agonizing minutes, but I finally managed to do it. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light of my new surroundings, I realized that I was standing before Lord Vivek himself. He was simply staring at me, floating above his throne and staring at me with his piercing eyes. When I began to prostrate myself as a sign of respect, he held up one of his hands as if to say it wasn't necessary. Was I dead? Was Lord Vivek pleased with me? Was he about to strike me down in anger for my somewhat sordid past? Suddenly I understood everything. Suddenly I realized that I was brought here for a reason. I should have died in those ash wastes, but Lord Vivek must have seen something inside me that he hadn't seen in millennia and decided to spare me from my fate. Thus begun my ascent to sainthood. Thus begun the rise of Saint Jiub. And that is the story of Saint Jiub the Eradicator, a sweet and nostalgic way to end our journey through the Elder Scrolls V. And with that gift we have now fully explored and curated the curious curiosities for the Soul Cairn and all of Skyrim, as this is the final episode. I do hope you have enjoyed this utterly unique area with its ghastly fields, crooked towers, and deathly dark corners, where many obscure and unexplainable oddities lay in wait for the keen explorer to discover and question. So whether they were new finds or old friends, I do hope that you have enjoyed the curious curiosities of the Soul Cairn. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Camel, and I do hope that you have thoroughly enjoyed the Curating Curiosities video for the eerie and gothic plane of oblivion known as the Soul Cairn. If you did enjoy this video and you would like to see more of these types of videos, please consider subscribing. It helps me know that people are interested in this kind of content, and it will result in more of it in the long run. And if you do enjoy these Curating Curiosities videos, please feel free to check out the links in the description. These of course will lead you directly to the Curating Curiosities videos that I've already done for Skyrim. If you did learn something new in this video, please leave a like. I'd appreciate it greatly. If you have any theories, backstories, imaginings, or explanations for any of these curiosities, please leave a detailed explanation of what your thoughts are in the form of a comment down below. I'm very interested in hearing some of your explanations for some of these ever so strange and curious finds within the Soul Cairn. The community's collective mind power will be much greater than mine, I hope. So hopefully together we can come up with all the backstories for these curiosities. Now down there in the description you can also find links to all of my social media. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And if you would like to become one of my heroic patrons or a sponsor, you can of course support the channel that way. As I'm sure you know, all of my time and energy goes into making these videos that I create for you to enjoy. So your support is most genuinely appreciated and welcomed in any and all forms. So thank you very much for watching, thank you very much for supporting the channel. I've been Camel, and I'll see you very shortly in the next video. I'll see you there soon.